Arson, Anarchy, and Anxiety, the Red Scare of the 1920s as a conflict and compromise in history. In 1917 to 1920, a big historical event called the Red Scare had happened. This was a big conflict in history because Americans had feared communist Russians, which led to some Russian immigrants to start bombing places and mailing bombs to politicians. Because of that, a man named A. Mitchell Palmer set up raids to arrest these Russian immigrants, also known as Reds. Many innocent Russians who were just in America for a better life were also arrested because people feared they were part of the group of people causing terror. There was a compromise here, though. That is, the people who have caused terror being deported. President Woodrow Wilson. President Woodrow Wilson was the President of the United States from 1913 to 1921. He was the president during the Red Scare. People say he was sick and did not see the situation of the Red Scare clearly. This resulted in Attorney General Palmer to take strong actions. Alexander Mitchell Palmer. Alexander Mitchell Palmer was Attorney General from 1919 to 1921. He is best known for supervising the Palmer raids during the Red Scare of the 1920s. The raids were on communist Reds. Many Reds were arrested because Americans feared communism. He only made these strong actions to gain attention from voters so that he could become president the next year. One of his first actions was to prevent coal miners from going on strike. He then ordered a series of raids to arrest leftist leaders. World War I. The Red Scare happened about a year after World War I. World War I made many Americans vulnerable and scared, which is a big part of why the Red Scare was as big as it was. Because of the war, people feared the threat of communism. The reason the Reds were arrested and deported was because they were communists. Americans feared having a communist government, which is why most Reds were arrested. The communist form of government was adopted in Russia because of the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. William Allen White says it should be agreed that a man may believe what he chooses. Bombs. Many immigrants, also known as Reds, sent bombs in the mail to people in office and judges who had sentenced some immigrants to death. Approximately 36 booby-trap bombs were mailed to prominent politicians. A newspaper called The Evening World reads, "Red leader among score arrested in Pennsylvania City after infernal machines wreck 5 homes." Judge Knott, who had sentenced 2 anarchists to prison in April, was blown up at 12:52 a.m. It is certain that it was the biggest and most powerful bomb ever set off in that city. 2 bombs exploded 2 homes, and police arrested anyone who looked suspicious on site, including an Australian named Louis Batchery, because he had a small black bag which was empty. Raids. Raids and arrests on Reds occurred in November of 1919 and January of 1920. Both raids were planned and supervised by the Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer. The Reds were all communists, and the fear of communism was the reason why these raids occurred. Police and Justice Department officials broke into people's homes who were foreign-born, and then hundreds of immigrants were then deported, even if they hadn't been put on trial yet. These are known as the Chicago Raids. On New Year's Day in 1920, about 150 communists, socialists, and anarchists were arrested, plus a few more or less innocent bystanders. The next day, the Fed started arresting people who were born in other countries. The raids on the Reds were called the Palmer Raids, named after the U.S. Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer. Palmer deported foreigners suspected of revolutionary activity. The goal was to deport as many members as possible to destroy the whole organization. On the 21st of December in 1919, approximately 200 of the Union of Russian Workers were deported back to Russia. Strikes. Many workers went on strike during the Red Scare because of the threat of American freedoms. As many as 2 million workers went on strike in 1919. These strikes were called the labor strikes, and they occurred because of the threat of communism from Russian immigrants. These protests came as a shock to some Americans who considered their country to be the home of free business. They did not see a point for labor unions. They feared the growing wave of strikes meant the U.S. faced the same revolution that Russia did not too long before. A very big strike was the Boston police strike in the September of 1919. The police voted to walk out of work at 5:45 p.m. This resulted in people breaking into homes and shops, stealing stuff because no police were there to stop them. During World War I, many strikes occurred and workers were willing to lose their jobs to try and improve working conditions. Railroad workers wanted the government to take permanent control of running the trains, and so did coal miners. 200,000 farmers joined a group that wanted major economic changes. An intense long-term effect of the Red Scare was organized labor. Organized labor was badly affected because it was damaged when employers decided not to introduce the American Plan, which would forbid mandatory union. The fear of immigrants of the era contributed to the anti-immigration laws of the 1920s, which America is still affected by today. Basically, the Red Scare has been a huge conflict in history. Many people were affected by this, and even the government was changed by this event. The war before this event is one of the main reasons why this happened. Many strikes have went on during this time period just because of one thing: the threat of communism. The compromise was all the bad communist immigrants who were causing terror were sent back to their countries. Things that have happened back then during the Red Scare still affect America today.